Okay, good. Thank you for joining today. I'm sorry for the delay. We are running a little bit late. So let's dive into the agenda so that we all can leave in a timely manner. Before we get into the presentations, can we have some introductions? My name is Chandra. I'm with ECIA, Joseph Brown.
I'm Joseph Brown with Parsons, and I will be the consultant for the speech program.
Dave Ness, City of Dubuque. Jack Stuart, ECIA.
That's the Vice City of the Engineering.
Bob Chisel, City of Dubuque Engineering. David Resnick, Dubuque City Council. Jason Duba, City of Dubuque Planning.
Herman, City of Dubuque Planning. Russell Everett, Dubuque County Road.
Mike London, City of Dubuque.
Steve Linder, City of Dubuque.
Pat Miller, City of Dubuque. Paul Uzell, Drive Rail, and Iowa Rail Captains Alliance.
Okay, Kelly Brown, Jackson County Economic Alliance.
Ned Flagel, Jackson County Supervisor.
Annette Ernst, City of Piasta.
Mike Stanish, Jackson County Board of Supervisors.
Josh Bolt, City of Coconut.
Stacy Scott, ECIA.
Dan Wheeler, Delaware County Supervisor-elect.
Jack Madden, Delaware County Supervisor.
Truman Ulrich, Delaware County Supervisor.
Ray Koopman, Delaware County Engineer.
I'm Bob Sinkler, representing the Ports of Eastern Iowa.
Doug Lilly, Illinois DOT out of Springfield.
Stu Anderson, Iowa DOT. Brad Cavanagh, Mayor here in Dubuque. Dr. Torres Cacho, District 5.
Okay,
District 6.
People online, can you please introduce yourself? Linda, can you please start? Linda? Okay, Barb, can you please introduce yourself? Okay,
Barb
Mary,
Hacker, Galena Area Chamber of Commerce.
thank you. Mary, can you please introduce yourself? Mary, sorry, you are.
Hi, I'm Mary Mulgrew-Gronin, and I am a commissioner on the Iowa DOT board.
Okay, Tim, can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Tim Vick. I'm the city manager for the city of Manchester. I've been here for 19 years, and unfortunately, this is the first year I've had to miss this meeting and the lunch that's provided. So, Chandra, I'll take a to-go bag when we get a chance.
Come your way.
Francis, can you please introduce yourself?
Francis Shelford, Urban and Regional Planner for Wisconsin Department of Transportation.
Don?
Don Swanker, Jackson County Supervisor, and I guess I've already made my presence known, sorry.
Jason?
Yeah, hi, Jason Kraft, City of Clinton, City Engineer.
Sam?
Sam Shea, Iowa DOT, formerly known as the district planner, your previous Hector.
Susan?
Susan Farber, Dubuque City Council, and Chandra, I will not need a doggy bag.
Rick? Sorry, Rick, you're muted.
You say Connie?
No, Rick Jones.
Okay.
Okay, Scott, can you please introduce yourself?
Scott Madison, the mayor of Clinton.
Connie?
Connie Benkin, the mayor of Manchester, Iowa.
Okay, who is this read.ai?
Nothing.
No, that's meeting, sorry. Dakin?
Yeah, Dakin Schultz, Federal Highway, Iowa Division.
Wayne?
Wayne Kennecker, Dubuque County Supervisor.
Is there anyone else I'm missing? Can you please introduce yourself?
Ernie Balaba with Dubuque Community Schools.
Thank you, Ernie. Okay, thank you all. I appreciate it. So the first presentation will be from Mayor Brad Cavanagh, who is the chair of DMATS. So, Mayor.
Oh, thanks, Ed. Okay. Really appreciate it. Very nice of you. Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. Good to see you here today. Very glad to be able to join you on this beautiful winter day and our first snow here. Nice job on the roads, by the way, everybody. It was really actually pretty easy to get around today, so thank you very much. Well, as I already introduced myself, I'm Brad Cavanagh. I serve here as the mayor here in Dubuque. And I also serve as the chair of the Dubuque Metropolitan Area Transportation Study, or DMATS, as we call it. It is wonderful to see you here today, and I want to thank our state legislators, Iowa Department of Transportation commissioners, Department of Transportation staff, members of DMATS, Regional Planning Area 8, and everyone else for attending today. It's very, very good to be able to get together like this every year. So thank you very much for giving me a few minutes to be able to share some thoughts with you from the perspective of DMATS and all of us here in the Dubuque region. With the few moments that I have, I want to share our thanks for your support for some specific projects in the region. And then I also want to highlight some specific initiatives like our Quiet Zone study, the Streets Project, Safe Streets and Roads for All, our EV preparation, and of course, the Dubuque's recent RAISE grant award. But to begin, I would like to extend a special thanks to our congressional delegation. I don't think anybody was able to join us here today, but for their ongoing commitment to our region. Their support has been instrumental in securing federal funding through programs such as the RAISE grant, which funded the Building Bridges to Employment and Equity project, and the SMART grant, which supported the Streets project in 2024 and the years ahead. I also want to thank the Iowa DOT commissioners and staff for their continued support and investment in the construction of major projects in our region, and especially Stu, thank you very much for being here today. We do appreciate getting together with you every year like this. Additionally, I want to commend the Iowa legislature and the Iowa DOT for their ongoing efforts to review the state's fuel tax rates and vehicle registration fees. Past adjustments to these important revenue sources have helped fund critical road and bridge projects across the state. And as we all know, rising construction costs and a fixed gas tax create significant challenges for the Iowa DOT and communities within Iowa in maintaining the current transportation system moving forward. Although the bipartisan infrastructure law provided new federal funding and programming, we must remember that inflation has made our projects more expensive and difficult to complete within budget. And DMATS recommends implementing a variable rate gas tax that adjusts to some degree without the need for regular legislative action, helping to accommodate inflationary pressures like the ones we are feeling now. I want to turn now to our Quiet Zone study. So DMATS and our partners are proactive, recognizing that our transportation system extends beyond the Dubuque metro area into a broader region. We understand that global economic conditions and external forces can affect our transportation system and our economy. The efficiency of our transportation system is crucial to the region's competitiveness and growth potential. One example of regional coordination is the DMATS Railroad Quiet Zone Study, completed this past summer in partnership with Dubuque County and the cities of Dubuque, East Dubuque, and Piasta. The study was the result of a process that began in 2021 and in response to the merger of the Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern Railroads. Over time, this merger is expected to nearly double the volume of freight train traffic in our region, increasing noise pollution and heightened safety concerns for the CPKC rail crossings in Dubuque County and the cities of Dubuque, Piasta, and as well as the BNSF rail crossings in the city of East Dubuque. The study evaluated and recommended the best methods for designating a railroad quiet zone at specified crossings within the study area and improving safety at these locations. Building on this work, DMATS, in partnership with the cities of Dubuque and East Dubuque, has applied for the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program. This funding will support the implementation of the study's recommendations by enhancing safety at 17 rail crossings in our region. Turning now to the Streets Project, DMATS is also working to implement advanced traffic control technology through our Streets Project. The Streets system will utilize traffic control strategies to enable dynamic traffic routing in 9 corridors in the Dubuque metro area. This project is divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 encompasses all primary system and high traffic corridors. Phase 2 focuses on the downtown Dubuque area, and Phase 3 includes the US 20 bridge, US 61-151 bridge, and the Illinois 35 in East Dubuque, which serves as a major detour route during bridge events. Phase 1 of the project is set for deployment in the spring of 2025. One major challenge for the Streets Project is effectively providing drivers with information they can use to make informed decisions about the routes they take to get to their destinations. Deployment of the project will include installation of new roadside digital message signs to communicate with drivers, but this method can only convey a limited amount of information. To address this issue, US DOT awarded DMATS a $2 million SMART grant to collaborate with a vehicle infotainment system provider to display the traffic information from the streets model on in-vehicle infotainment systems. DMATS will be partnering with Herman International, a global leader in connected car technology, on this initiative. We extend our gratitude to the Iowa DOT, Illinois DOT, and the US DOT for contributing grant funds to the Streets project. Next, I want to highlight our work with Safe Streets and Roads for All, or SS4A. Safety is a significant concern in the DMATS region. In collaboration with the RPA and the Institute for Transportation at Iowa State University, also known as InTrans, DMATS is developing a comprehensive safety action plan for 58 cities within the DMATS and RPA 8 regions. The plan will identify solutions to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries for all roadway users, including pedestrians, bicyclists, transit riders, and drivers. This plan is funded by a US DOT Safe Streets and Roads for All planning grant. When it comes to the move toward electrification in transportation, DMATS is committed to investing in the future and researching electric vehicle infrastructure. Earlier this year, US DOT awarded $1.9 million from the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program to the City of Dubuque to install EV charging stations at 5 downtown locations. These charging stations will include level 2 and direct current fast chargers and are expected to be operational by late 2025. Building on this success, DMATS aims to expand the number of EV charging stations in the area. The National Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Program, or NEVI, is a federal initiative that could help us achieve this goal. The federal government allocates National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula funds to the states. In the first iteration of Iowa's statewide EV plan, use of the NEVI funding was limited to interstate corridors, excluding the DMATS region from participation. DMATS is eager to expand its EV charging capacity and respectfully request that the Iowa DOT expand the NEVI funding eligibility to the DMATS area in future versions of Iowa's EV plan. Finally, I would like to highlight the RAISE grant. The Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity grants, also known as RAISE, are vital for local governments and have positively impacted communities nationwide. The City of Dubuque has been awarded a $25 million RAISE infrastructure implementation grant from the US DOT for a significant multi-phased infrastructure project in downtown Dubuque. This grant will fund the Building Bridges to Employment and Equity project, which aims to enhance connectivity and safety for all users in designated transportation corridors. The goal is to better connect neighborhoods and residents with economic opportunities, recreational amenities, and community resources in the Kerper Boulevard Industrial Park, Chaplain Schmidt Island, downtown Dubuque, the historic Millwork District, and the west side of the city via downtown Intermodal Transportation Center. So in closing, I want to mention one more new initiative related to the work that DMATS is doing in our region. The Mississippi River is a significant asset for the DMATS region, and enhancing the river is crucial for the regional economy. It's crucial for tourism, transportation capabilities as well. Improving the transportation system along the river is also one of the top priorities for the Iowa DOT. DMATS recognizes the importance of having lobbying power in Washington, D.C. to secure federal funding for improvements to the Mississippi River in our area. DMATS supported the formation of the Ports of Eastern Iowa Authority, as it understands that neither DMATS nor the RPA can lobby effectively on behalf of the river. I would like to express my gratitude to the Dubuque County Supervisors for representing DMATS and the DMATS region on the Ports of Eastern Iowa Board. I also extend my thanks to Louisa, Muscatine, Scott, Clinton, and Jackson counties for joining in this initiative. So once again, I'd like to thank the Iowa DOT for their partnership. We look forward to continuing our collaborative efforts to serve our residents and stakeholders in improving our transportation systems. So thank you for being here today. Happy holidays to everyone.
Okay, next I request Mayor Cavanagh, Mayor Scott Maddasion, the chair of RPA 8, to say some words to the board.
Thank you, everyone. I think it's good afternoon now. I think it just hit noon. Again, I'm Scott Maddasion. I'm the mayor of Clinton, Iowa, and I'm the chair of the Regional Planning Affiliation 8. Thanks for everyone for being there today. We really appreciate this meeting each year. As Mayor Cavanagh mentioned earlier, I want to extend my gratitude to the congressional staff for their ongoing commitment to our region for securing those federal funds and bringing those different grant programs to help our economy and address the needs of our communities. Also want to express my gratitude for the state legislators and the Iowa Department of Transportation for continuing to evaluate the state fuel tax. Many communities are struggling to keep up with inflation and the rising infrastructure costs of projects. I think we all feel that. And this is due to that fixed nature of the fuel tax. So RPA 8 supports a variable rate fuel tax that would adjust automatically without requiring regular legislative action. This approach would help mitigate some of those impacts of inflation on our communities when we're doing these projects. I'm very proud of the steps that RPA board has taken to address the needs of the small communities within our region. The Rural County Transportation Program implements an application process at the county level, and it's designed to fund those non-federal aid projects in small communities with populations that are under 5,000. These communities have faced a lot of challenges in accessing RPA funds in the past, but due to this program, we've created a lot of new opportunities for them. And since its implementation 7 years ago, the RPA 8 has funded 110 projects in small communities within our region. So it's been a very successful program, and we thank the board for implementing this 7 years ago. Would also like to recognize our board and the staff for their successful planning review, which included commendations for incorporating small communities on the RPA board as well, thereby enhancing representation and access to funding opportunities for these areas. As Mayor Cavanagh highlighted, that safety is a major concern in the DMATS and the RPA region. I'd like to express my gratitude for the collaboration between the DMATS board and the RPA board and the Institution for Transportation at Iowa State University in developing the comprehensive safety action plan for 58 cities within the DMATS and the RPA region. As you know, the DMATS and RPA boards were awarded $394,000 through the U.S. DOT Safe Streets and Roads for All planning grant. We're working to complete that plan, and we'll soon reach a stage where we can begin applying for project implementation grants for the safety improvement projects. Improving conditions along the Mississippi River in Clinton, Dubuque, and Jackson counties is a priority for RPA, one of my passions as well. As Mayor Cavanagh noted, advocating for federal funding can be challenging, and the Ports of Eastern Iowa Authority will facilitate this process. Very exciting to have this kind of up and running. The RPA board supports this initiative with the Ports of Eastern Iowa, as we need a strong lobbying presence in Washington, D.C. as well. We deeply appreciate the contributions of Clinton, Dubuque, and Jackson County and the supervisors for their representation of the region, and then a partnership with Louisa, Muscatine, and Scott counties on the Ports of Eastern Iowa group. And lastly, as I close here, as chair of the RPA Policy Committee, I want to thank the members of both the tech and the policy committees for their hard work over the past years. Their efforts are extremely vital to everyone living and working in our region. The quality of life in small communities and rural areas relies heavily on the quality of the transportation system, particularly our roads, highways, and bridges. They do a wonderful job. So we thank them very much. Appreciate everyone being there again. Thank you. Happy holidays to everyone.
Presentation is from Parsons. Parsons will be providing an update to the group on the streets project as well as the smart grant. Just remember, this is more like a 10,000 feet presentation, so a lot of details are not provided in the presentation, but there'll be a very big study that will be happening and with a lot of details coming. So Parsons, sorry, Joseph, can you do that?
All right, I think you guys can hear me all right. It's a small room, right? Several of you have been involved in previous presentations, so I'm starting sort of from the beginning quickly. So an overview for some of you. Dave Ness has probably heard this 10 times, a lot of it, so I apologize for that, but some of you haven't, so I'm starting from the beginning. I have a half hour to present, so I'm only going to touch the surface of things, but let me go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk first a little bit of introduction background with Parsons and Herman. Herman was added with the SMART grant. And I'll add more details about them. We'll provide a background about the project, some of the goals, the program phases. We'll talk more about the streets phase 1, the SMART grant, and then the status of where we're at with things on streets and the SMART grant, so you know where we're going, where we're at. All right, doesn't seem to work. All right, let me go here. Okay, come on. Oh, now that it's on it, it might work.
Go down.
All right. So just 2 minutes, and I won't spend a lot of time, but a little bit of details. Parsons is a very large organization. We've been around for over 80 years now, over $5 billion a year in revenue. I am in the intelligent infrastructure section of Parsons, which is 800 employees or so. We are the nation's largest ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems Integrator. As far as large scale or complicated systems, we do more than anyone else in the industry. And I just have a quick representation of where some of our projects are. So we've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing it for well over 30 years now. Herman came on with the Smart Grant project. Herman is actually part of Samsung. Herman is also a very large organization. They've been around for many years, and they're over $10 billion in revenue annually, and that's just one piece of Samsung. They are very proactive and very much into technology. You can see the 3 different areas they're involved in here. The one we're interested in, obviously, is automotive. They provide infotainment systems into several of the OEMs, that's the auto industry vehicles. They also provide the communication to the vehicles. So they are a key player in the Smart Grant. All right. And like I said, they're large scale, part of Samsung, been around for many years. Most of you probably know Herman from, what is it, JBL speakers. That's them, but they also do a lot of other stuff. Interesting thing about Herman, they've been involved in connected vehicle technology stuff for many years. They are members of a lot of the standards organizations. You can see them here. That is sort of important with the SMART project that we're talking about. And you'll see why we are not developing a standard, but we're developing an application and an aggregated data set and an open API that will then become part of the standards at some point, probably. So making sure we're staying in line with what's going on in the industry is very, very important. Just a little bit of background, and you guys are probably all familiar with this, but just in case. The streets program started over 8 years ago now, and the city has been implementing communications infrastructure, cameras, and upgrades to their signal system. That process has put them in a good position to get the streets grant. The streets project is well underway. In fact, the centralized system is all in place. We've downloaded signal timing to the controllers, and we will be implementing solutions when there's incidents or things going on in the infrastructure. That is now in I would call it the final testing phase. So we've downloaded all the stuff to the controllers. We're testing that to make sure that's all good. And you'll start to see changes to the traffic signal timing, which you won't see it. And that's one of the things that's hard to understand. You won't necessarily see it, but there will be changes in the near future to timing when there are major incidents going on. So the streets project is in a couple of phases, and the mayor talked about that a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit about there we go. First, let's talk a little bit about the goals and the benefits. So what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to improve mobility, reduce congestion, and enhance safety. I mean, that's at the top level. That's what we're trying to do. And how are we doing that? Optimizing traffic signal timing. So we're providing a solution, or they have a solution now that actually provides them a lot of details to help support traffic signal timing and optimization not during normal times, but also during major incidents now. And if any of you how many of you are involved in traffic signal stuff? Not too many, but if you were ever trying to implement changes to traffic signal timing as a result of an incident manually in real time, it'd be very complicated, very difficult to do. And if you did it, you wouldn't be sure that what you're doing is actually optimizing the signal timing. So this sort of leads to what we're doing with the streets project to improve that. So we're improving incident response, providing tools to support optimization of the management of the system in general. So we're monitoring what's going on out there so you can help maintain and manage the system. And we're providing more information to the motorists. so that they can make better informed decisions. Mayor Cavanagh talked about the phases of it, and this is a little more detail on that. So phase one is the initial centralized system, which, like I said, is primarily in place, and we're fine tuning some of the details now. It included also, we designed dynamic message signs, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, that are going to go in, and they're combination signs that provide travel time from one point to another. That aspect did get a little bit delayed in the sense that from getting through the environmental process to put the signs out there and putting that out to bid and all that, longer, more complicated process than we had hoped. Kind of leads to how we ended up with the SMART grant. Getting the information to the public is complicated. SMART grant gives us another way to do that. So keep that in mind. So phase two will add, and the mayor talked about this, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. More of this integration with the downtown area. Phase three is supporting the I-35 and providing information across the bridges. SMART grant phase one is where we're at now. The SMART grant process is two phases for everybody. The first phase is a smaller $2 million project that allows you to gather all the information, build a system that aggregates data throughout the region, and provides sort of a prototype of what we do in the long run. The real goal here is to get phase two. Phase two is up to $15 million and allows you to fill the gaps. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. But those are the different phases. So a little bit about each of the projects. So phase one of the streets program integrates data together to optimize the performance of your signal system, your operations overall in the region, to manage traffic. What are we integrating together? INRIX data. INRIX is a third-party provider that provides traffic data. There's INRIX, there's HERE, there's TomTom, there's several different data providers. That information is provided through the state. Video analytics, the city has a lot of video cameras, and they're using video analytics, and we're pulling that video analytics. And the video analytics is providing counts at the intersection, similar to what you're seeing here. So it's looking at all the turning movement counts, which helps us manage traffic in real time, but also can be provided for planning and purposes in the future. The cyclica data is a form of getting information from one point to another. We're getting information from the signal system, from Waze. We're modeling real-time traffic, and this is the key aspect of the system right now. Yeah. Oops. Let me skip. I'm going to skip forward one. So the key aspect that's unique for this project is we are the first in the world that I'm aware of that we're doing real-time modeling for a whole metropolitan area, and we're using the real-time model to help us determine the appropriate traffic signal timing when something unusual happens. So normally your traffic signals are running basically a time of day, and they're switching between different timing plans based on the time of day. But when unusual things happen in the roadway, you want to be able to change the traffic signal timing to optimize the signal timing for that particular situation. An accident on 20, an accident on the bridge causes major impact on the roadway. You're not going to change it for minor things, but for any major incident, you want to be able to change the traffic signal timing. As I mentioned, to do that manually, very complicated, and you're not sure you're doing the right thing. So we're modeling the whole metropolitan area in real time and running the plans, potential timing plans against the model, and the model is determining what plan we should use. There's a lot of input that goes into that. The model is also running in the background all the time. So the map you're seeing here. So we're getting information, real-time information that draws up a map and color codes it based on levels of congestion, similar to what you see on Google, right? But above and beyond what Google does, we're forecasting out 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and 60 minutes in the future. So I can change that map to say, what is the traffic going to look like in 60 minutes? And that's the details that are coming out of the model and that we're using to drive the traffic signal timer. I mentioned that we're providing information on changeable message signs. Most of them are combination signs, and which means it's a fixed sign with an insert. It's going to have travel times at various locations. The blue dots are these combination signs. We're talking about inflation. We're probably not going to be able to install all these because the costs have gone up. And that's part of what we're working with the contractors right now on. What can we implement with the budget we have right now in the first phase? We'll get a lot of them in, but not necessarily all of them. But the idea is you get to this sign, it's going to give you travel times, either 20 or an alternate route. Then you get up here, it'll say what's the travel time on Penn versus Asbury. So it's all geared towards if there's a major incident, making sure people understand. People aren't going to make a change because there's a 2-minute difference. But if now you have a major incident and now it's 30 minutes to get to downtown and this is only 15, people might make the change and it'll balance automatically. We're monitoring the traffic all the time. and providing those travel times in real time and updating it in real time. So as more people divert, it may be actually worse to take the alternate route, and you'll have that information. The difficulty is you only have these signs at certain locations, and it's not easy to find locations to put them in, or to put them in, and all that is very costly. So that's how we got into this whole smart grant. What's a better way to get this information to the motorists? All right. I won't go into the modeling stuff. Phase one also includes upgrades to the traffic signal system and an integrated traffic signal system. The key to this is in order to implement the real-time modeling, you need to be able to communicate between the signal system and the model in real time. And this is just a screenshot of the traffic signal system. The system also provides analytics tools, ATSPMs, for those of you who are familiar with traffic signals. So it's a series of reports that allows you to help optimize and analyze your traffic signal system. So those are all provided with the system. There will be, and in fact, it's implemented already. It's not public yet, but there is a public website that we're fine-tuning the data, making sure everything looks good before the information gets out. So this is a snapshot of the public website, which provides that map of the traffic data. It provides snapshots, so they can go and click on any camera and get snapshots of what's going on. Travel times. So you can click on the dynamic message signs icon, and it'll give you the same travel times that we're going to show on the DMS. So you'll be able to go into the map and say, okay, what's the travel time to downtown via this route, via that route. In addition to the DMS, we can also insert additional travel times if we want at certain locations. So we'll do that over time. It'll show you where all the incidents are, the planned events, and that sort of stuff, and links to other websites. All right. So that's the highlights of the Streets project. As I mentioned, with the Streets project, we were going through and looking to place these changeable message signs and thinking, all right, there's a complicated process. You got to maintain these signs. What's a better way to get this into the vehicles? And a lot of you probably already have vehicles that have some sort of information on the vehicle. So they have the infotainment system and they're providing you details. You can integrate your phone and get Google Maps in your vehicle through Android Auto and stuff. But it's lacking in that it doesn't have the right information that you can get from agencies. For example, if you've got Waze, how many of you use Waze? All right, so a good number of people use Waze. Waze will provide you crowdsourced data. So basically someone on their phone indicates that there's an accident, you know there's an accident. What you're missing is, what's the likely duration of the accident? Is it likely to be there? What kind of congestion it's causing? What are the details? What should I do in relation to that? So it gives you some basic information about it, but it's not giving you what you necessarily need to know. By integrating in the data from our Streets program, we can provide better and more accurate information to the motorists to provide better solutions. So that's kind of the concept here, is how do we, instead of just putting the information on signs with travel times, how do we provide more information to the motorists in real time when they need it to make the right decision? Now, for those of you who've all heard of connected vehicles, the concept of connected vehicles, there's vehicle-to-vehicle connections, right? And there's also vehicle-to-infrastructure. Most of the work in connected vehicles up to this point has been through RSUs and OBUs, roadside units. And so there's been this concept of you stick a roadside unit at the intersection. The roadside unit communicates to the intersection and communicates to sensors at the intersection and passes it onto an OBU, onboard unit on the vehicles. This has been in the works for, what, probably 25 years? They've been talking about RSUs and OBUs. And the problem with that is, in order for it to work, you have to have an RSU at each intersection, communicating to devices at the intersection, and to get that communication into the vehicles. So the vehicles have to have these OBUs, onboard units. The auto industry hasn't been real eager to put the onboard units into the vehicles because there wasn't that many RSUs. Corridors here and there that the states have tested with have put these RSUs in. To this date, no vehicles have the OBUs, except for ones that are custom put in after the fact. And that's because they were waiting for the infrastructure to be put in. So we went and said, okay, in talking with Herman, who provides the infotainment systems, most new vehicles have communications infrastructure via cellular. The difference between the cellular connection and the RSU OBU combination, the RSU OBU is milliseconds. So it can provide real safety information right at the intersection. So if you have detection that's detecting a person crossing the street, it can provide that information to the vehicle instant. We aren't going to be able to do that but we'll do it within a few seconds or maybe even less than a few seconds. So we can provide things, several things to the motorists like travel times or real-time traffic signal timing. So we can tell you when the signal's going to turn green. You don't need real-time information for that. We have that information. Incidents, events, special event details, rail crossings, all sorts of things we can provide information about without having that connection, the RSU, OBU, all through cellular. So that's what the focus of the smart grant is what can we do with the current cellular connections that most vehicles have already and providing that information into the vehicles. And this is sort of showing a diagram. So right now your ATMS, Advanced Transportation Management System, is a street system that's already in place. We're going to take the information we have in there now. We're going to package it in a fashion that makes sense for someone like Herman to put into their vehicles. It is a little bit different than what you'd use in an ATMS. The nature of the data and the format of the data has to be appropriate for them to put it in the vehicles. The bottom of this just shows, this was the traditional RSU and OBU side. This is going over cellular networks. So in the first phase of this project, we're going to aggregate the data, put it in a format that's usable for Herman, and Herman's going to start prototyping what it would look like in the vehicle. And then they're going to try and turn around and sell that to the OEMs, the vehicle manufacturers, to get it into vehicles. Now that process takes a while. So it isn't going to be next year or the year after. It'll take a few years before it gets into the vehicles. But the concept is, if we can sell them on that and get it into the vehicles, agencies don't have to spend a whole bunch of money putting dynamic message signs and all that stuff in the long run. They can actually get it directly into the vehicles. And a lot of the information that you want to get to them, you can use cellular versus RSUs and OBUs. And this just sort of shows the next step of it. So this is a Herman slide. This is what they call their MEC wave. So we're going to be packaging a lot of this data from the left-hand side, like the intersection, road conditions, and all sorts of other information, and making it available to the MEC wave. And from there, they get it into the vehicles where and when they need it. Right? And it's complicated. We had a whole workshop this morning talking about the different types of data and how you would provide it to them to make it useful. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of the data types. So congestion type information, road closures, rail crossings is an interesting one here that we talked about this morning. Currently, that's not something you get right now. So what we're trying to figure, what are the key things we can provide that are above and beyond what you can get from Google today, right? What can you get? And things like rail crossing, if we monitor the railroads and the crossings, we can determine when the train's going to be there, how long it's going to be there for, and provide that information in real time to the vehicles. So as you're approaching a rail crossing, you'll know whether the train's going to be there or not. Crashes, traffic signal timing, I talked about, special events. If you have special events that are affecting traffic, what does that mean? So a special event is an interesting one. It could be one of many, many things. So there's a location where the special event is, which you want to provide that information, but there's also an area of influence on the traffic. When do you want to notify them about a special event? So that's information that is better suited to come from the DOTs and the agencies than to be crowdsourced, because you're going to get anonymous data that's not necessarily accurate. Weather and road conditions. Dubuque, you have the two bridges. You can put what's called an RWIS station on the bridge, your road weather information system. You stick that on the bridge and it can monitor if there's icing on the bridge and stuff, and we can automatically pass that information on to vehicles at a time. And that could be done via cellular. Not only to avoid the bridge, but if they're on the bridge for a safety perspective. This sort of kind of sums it up. So this is the ATMS. The ATMS has a whole bunch of data and it's in this really complicated format. There's a map that goes along with it. They can, from the traffic management center, you can see exactly what's going on, but you can't stick something like this in the vehicle, right? What you got to stick in the vehicle is something very simple and very straightforward, which is something similar to what you got here. And so we're working with Herman to determine what are the types of information to provide, what format they need it in, and then what is it going to look like in the vehicle, right? It's simple. It's got to be set. Sort of a visual of an intersection, and one of the points of this is that you've probably heard of the RSU and OBU stuff and the stuff at the intersections. We are not providing the millisecond stuff, so we're not monitoring the pedestrians crossing and that sort of stuff. But we are telling them traffic signal timing, so it's more stuff they're gonna know before they get to the intersection. When is it gonna turn green? Is the intersection in flash? That sort of stuff. However, another part of that is what we're building with this project has to work with that in the future. So in the long run, 20 years from now, there's a very strong likelihood, well, 20 years, maybe longer than that most intersections will have these roadside units and they'll be able to connect directly to the vehicles. But that's going to take time, and it isn't useful until almost all of the intersections have it. And the OEMs don't want to put it in their vehicles until that is the case. So in the meantime, we're using cellular, but it's got to mold with the RSUs and OBUs as the industry matures. Just to give you a little more context in this. Right now, in the vehicles, if you have Android Auto or any of those, you can get a map in your vehicle and you get all that, you can Google Maps, all this stuff. So this is sort of where the industry is now from a perspective of, providing the overall context of what's going on. The other side of this is these active safety stuff. This is that RSUs and OBUs, right? Real-time information sensors to stop vehicle collisions and that sort of stuff, and vehicle to pedestrian, all that sort of stuff. That's the other side. We're looking at it. So with this project, we're looking at what can we do in this, it's covered here, second to 2 second to 5 second type time frame, that it doesn't have to be that time sensitive, but it's giving them enough information to be helpful and help manage traffic. So we're looking at this area right here, situational awareness. Just one more visual here that's kind of helpful. So when you talk about RSUs and OBUs, they're looking at this, the intersection talking directly to the vehicle. What we're doing is this, we're using the existing cellular network, and from the cellular network, Herman's mech wave will talk to the cell towers and provide the information to the right vehicles at the right time. A little bit different concept. So where are we at with the project? So part of the phase 1 streets, the centralized system is basically done, although we're, as I talked about for any of you who have been involved a year ago when we had a presentation on it, we're optimizing the system now. So we've got the information in the controllers, the central system's there. We're determining that the controllers are responding properly when we implement the traffic signal timings and all that. And that's where that's it. There's a website in place, like I mentioned, and that'll be available to the public in the not too distant future. We just need to get the devices in the field. Phase 3 is already started, so we're doing the design for the field infrastructure for devices that will provide information to the motorists and collecting the right information to understand how to cross the bridges. If there's a problem with one of the bridges closed, you can take the other one. It'll give travel times, approximate travel times, one route or the other kind of thing. So that design is in process right now. We're in the Smart Grant phase 1. We're defining the elements. We're developing use cases. We had a use case workshop this morning where we went through and said, okay, what are the types of data that we want to provide to the vehicles? What format does that data have to be in to make it useful? And how do we make it more useful than what you can get from like Google Maps right now or from Waze? And it is the intelligence that we can provide at the ATMS central system that provides that value. Phase 1 is due in about 16 months. What's interesting about that is that what we really want to make sure we do is get the phase 2 of the Smart Grant. It's a $15 million program versus a $2 million program. What phase 2 allows us to do is, if you win phase 2, that'll help fill the gaps. So we sold to the US DOT the concept of Dubuque is the perfect size city to provide a comprehensive set of data to the auto industry to get into their vehicles. What's happening now, like I mentioned, is the auto industry isn't doing much with it because they're getting information this quarter, that quarter, here and there. They want a whole metropolitan area and they want a complete set of data. So this is meant to be a sample of what a complete set of data would look like. So we're going to implement phase 1 and we're going to integrate the data we have. We're also going to identify where are the gaps. What additional data would be good to have in the motor vehicles? And one of those, for example, is the rail crossings. So if we can provide good, accurate rail crossing information, that's useful. Well, with phase 2, we could implement a system under that $50 million that provides value to everyone, not just to the auto industry. We talked about this morning. There's certain bus stops that are sensitive, and there's a lot of children around and stuff that they want to notify during the right times, people. So we could tell people when there's a problem, when you want to avoid that area, when you want to be cautious. So there's a lot of little details that we can provide via that. So big part of this, and if any of you have concepts or ideas of things you'd like to see that would be important that you think people would like to have in the vehicle, let us know. We're happy to add that and consider it. The goal is, and the key thing to remember here is the goal is we want to win this. This is due in 9 months. So it's due, the grant application will be due before the project of phase 1 is complete. So we're doing this sort of in parallel. So we're determining and going through and setting up this data aggregator, providing the APIs and all that for the auto industry to use. But we're also trying to put together the package for the grant too, for the phase 2 of the grant, which help fills the gap. So this could be anything from upgrading certain traffic signals to integration with your computer-aided dispatch for your law enforcement and emergency services. There's a lot of things that can be put into this. We want to be the metropolitan area that provides all the information. If we can do that, that'll help us sell getting phase 2. Or if we can show that we can do it with phase 2. So that's basically it. A lot to go over in a half hour. Any questions, comments? Sure.
What is the benefit to doing the RSU OBU if you already have the cellular in place? It sounds like you need to put a piece of infrastructure out there where right now it's just wireless.
So cellular is not quite as quick. It can have a few second delay, as you're probably aware, right? The OSUs, OBUs, and RSUs, you're talking milliseconds delay. So it can notify a vehicle instantly. So there's certain safety applications that are more appropriate. If it's like you want to notify, like, well, you'll see RSUs and OBUs now on buses, for example, as tests. Well, they'll put it on the bus, an OBU on the bus, and they'll put detection at the intersection for pedestrians and bicycles and all that, and it'll warn the bus driver if he has his right blinker on that there's somebody there. That's a millisecond type thing. We're not going to do that. But we can provide all kinds of information into the vehicle via cellular as long as it's not needed in the millisecond type level. And almost 98% of what you want to get to the motorist doesn't need the millisecond.
How far in advance do they get that in the RSU?
RSU and OBU? It will be monitoring it like
Before you get to the intersection.
Yeah,
A lot of times if there's an accident going, like you're supposed to turn left, but there's an accident down that way, so now you need to go straight. Are you gonna get it before you're in the left turn lane?
Well, see, with the cellular connection, it doesn't need to be millisecond. That you want to know long before you get to the intersection to not go that route. So that we can easily provide without the RSUs and OBUs. If you want to tell the bus that there's a person right there in front of them, that's millisecond type stuff, right? He's got to know right then and there. He put his blinker on, and there's somebody you didn't see in his blind spot.
At some point, both of them will kind of.
Yeah. At some point, both of them should work together, but it's going to be a long time before RSUs are, there's tasks throughout the country all over the place with these RSUs and OBUs. Most of them are like transit vehicles or other emergency vehicles and other things testing it, but no OEMs have OBUs in their vehicles yet. But we do have cellular connections to those vehicles and infotainment system.
The roadside units are almost like a micro simulation of the intersection.
Yeah.
I can tell what lane you're in, so it'll give you information based on you're in the left turn lane. Where the cellular is not to that detail.
Correct. So, what, there was a question back here?
Yeah, once the streets phase 1 is in place and operating, how much calibration and adjustment do you think there's going to be?
Well, we're in that sort of starting the calibration phase. And I mentioned this with the last time I presented was we're deploying it now. The initial signal timings are actually in the controller. We've tested it and make sure that's all working properly. Now we're sort of in that calibration phase. When you implement the change, is it doing exactly what we want? We're also adding more video analytics to make sure the more detection we have, feeding into the model, the more accurate the model is. As if I think were you a planner?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you understand how models work. The more information we feed into it, the better the information is going to be. So yeah, it will take some calibration. It won't be perfect yet. It'll get better and better over time. Is the answer. I'm not quite to the point where I can say it's going to be next week or 2 weeks. It might be a couple of months. And then we'll start implementing it in real time for real incidents. Well, the next phase is we're actually implementing at night and making sure it does what we want when we implement the plans. That's where we're at now.
Wouldn't Google Maps and Waze want this information showing up on their app? Would they want to team with us? So we don't have to have a separate, display. And since they're competing against each other, you would think that this would be one leg up on everybody else. I'm sure you contacted them and said what you're doing. Would you be interested in partnering us?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're providing this data aggregator with all the data that we think is appropriate and making it available. We're making it available in an open API, so it won't be just available to Herman. We'll also encourage the Googles and the others information service providers to make use of the data. So it's not just so it will be available to them if they want to use it. Most of what Google's been interested in so far is just using crowdsourcing. We've talked to Google multiple times and thought I had them at one point where they were going to implement an interface to some of our ATMSs, and then they got off it. For them, it's just not, it's not top priority to implement it that way. They don't want to have to deal with the integration with agencies. But when they see the advantages, there's a lot of advantages. So we're doing real-time modeling, for example. So what Google, if you use Google now, like I go downtown Chicago all the time. I tell the story all the time. So our client is the city of Chicago, and it's normally 45-minute drive. AM peak can take an hour and a half, right? If you leave at 7 a.m. and Google tells you it's going to take an hour and a half, it's going to take you 2 hours. If you leave at 9 a.m. and it tells you an hour and a half, it's going to take an hour, because it just tells you what it is now. We're doing real-time modeling. One of the things we could provide to them is actually the projection of what it's going to be like a half hour from now. And in a long commute like that, it makes a difference. But there's a lot of value we can provide them. If there's a road work ahead, we can tell them when it's going to start and when it's going to end. There's a big difference there. So if it's not going to start until, if it's going to end before you get there, you don't care, right? So there's a lot of value we can add.
If they don't want to partner with you, then they can buy you out.
Well, this is an open interface. It's not us. It's going to be something that's available until to the industry. It's federally funded, so it has to be an open interface. And it's something that we're going to try and propagate, not just in Dubuque in the long run, but through cities throughout. And I've got multiple other clients who are interested in this concept.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you speak to more about the public website? The information, I mean, they're gonna have like a map, there's like real-time data. What's all involved with the public website?
I got sort of a visual of it. It's not. This isn't a really good snapshot. So it'll have a map, and this map is based on the data that we're bringing in. So it'll look similar to Google, but it won't be exactly the same. We have video images, so you'll be able to click on any camera. So it's going to show you where all the cameras are. You can click on any camera, it'll give you a snapshot. And if you click on this box, it'll show the video. So the public will be able to see that. You've got these dynamic message signs that are going in. So we have an icon for each dynamic message sign. And what's showing on that dynamic message sign is what's going to show on here. Actually, this is already here. The sign isn't in the ground, but we're already getting the travel time. So if you click on this, it's going to say from this point, if you take Penn Ave, it's 10 minutes. If you take JFK, it's going to take 6. These are just big numbers at the moment, but the real data is there, and we're actually providing those travel times on the map right now. We're in the same validation process with the map as we are with everything else, and making sure that the travel times make sense and everything's good before we open it up to the public.
How large of an area is that covering? I mean, is it the Corporal Limits City of Dubuque, going all the way out to Piasta? Is it, I mean, over in Illinois, Wisconsin? Well, what's the overall area? Just curious.
It is mostly the metro area. It spreads out a little bit. A large portion of the data comes from INRIX. And where we don't have INRIX and we don't have video analytics, we don't have any data. So it's most of the metropolitan area, but it's not extending out much past that. Now, with the phase 3, we're going to be adding detection data on the east side of the river. So that'll be included in. And with this SMART grant, hopefully we'll get more information. So that's kind of the idea, is to provide the whole metropolitan area in the long run, not just the city. In fact, if you look at this sort of shows it. It's the major roads in this area. We don't have the Southwest Arterial. We're not getting any data on that yet, so it's not being provided. But I wanted to show you the, here. So in the long run, this is the area we want to cover, with enough information to provide valuable stuff to everyone. Now, when you get into the outskirts, there's not too much going on, so you might not see too much, but this is where we'd like to be in the long run.
Hey, Chandra, I hate to interrupt, but this is fascinating. I feel like we could talk about it all day. But we only have so much time with Stuart, and I really do think we should let him get to the point where we can start to hear from him as well.
I think I'm done. If there's no more questions.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks again for inviting me up here. Again in December, we'll continue our lucky streak of having good weather. I just came a little early, but the roads were great for the drive up, so that's very nice. Going to cover a few topics, and thank you, Mayor Cavanagh, for bringing up the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. I didn't have a slide on that, but I will give a quick update on where we're at with that. There's been some interesting and good news from USDOT about that is strictly applicable to the interest in this area. But I thought I'd begin with some personnel updates at the DOT and our Transportation Commission. As always, want to talk a little bit about our 5-year construction program for the department and where we're at in that process. Of course, a lot of that discussion in recent years at the state and local level on programs is the impact of inflation. So I want to give you a snapshot of what our inflation trends are right now and how that is going to impact the next program. And then lastly, get into some discussion about the next reauthorization bill, Highway Trust Fund, how those all interrelate. And actually, I do want to close with another topic that is particularly of interest to our county partners. I know our county engineers have seen a pretty detailed presentation on this recently, but we do have with the boards and commissions legislation passed last session, there was elimination of the Secondary Road Fund Distribution Committee. And so I want to provide the latest update on how we're working with the Iowa Transportation Commission to continue that process moving forward. So personnel updates at the DOT itself. Our Chief Operations Officer was Troy German. Troy was a longtime DOT employee, former district engineer down in Southwest Iowa. He retired here in the last 4 months or so. And so our Director Scott Marlar hired Melissa Gillette to be our new Chief Operating Officer. Melissa was our Motor Vehicle Division Director. And so Melissa, our Chief Operating Officer, is focused on the internal operations of the department. So spend a lot of time working on budgetary matters, personnel, financial, a lot of administration activities for the department. So very excited to have Melissa in that new role. All not listed on here because I think most of you all are very aware of the changes in the district transportation planners. We've had a little bit of changing, swapping around of positions. Sam Shea moved over to cover the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City area with the retirement of Kathy Cutler. And then Hector Torres Cacho came up here from Fairfield, was the district transportation planner down in Southeast Iowa area. And then we have a new person to the department that has taken over Hector's spot in Southeast Iowa. So, but perhaps most importantly, especially to you in this room, is our Iowa Transportation Commission. As you know, these are 7 Iowans appointed by the governor and confirmed by the state senate. And they have an extremely important role defined in Iowa code, which is that they are actually the body responsible for developing and approving both our long-range transportation plan and our 5-year program. So it's not the DOT that approves a 5-year program. We're not the body that determines which bridge and road projects are going to be done. We don't award funding for our aviation transit projects, modal programs. That's all done by the Transportation Commission. And so they play a really, really important role. And we at the DOT think this is a really great system in Iowa. Provides a lot of transparency in decision-making and allows quick decision-making. So when there's new infrastructure bills or new laws and policies, this system really allows us to react quickly to those changes. So we're very strong supporters of the system we have in Iowa. Last June, we had 2 long-serving commissioners whose term ended, Sharice Yanni from the Sioux City area and Kathy Herman from the Des Moines area. Their terms ended, and so the governor made 2 new appointments.
Bill Herman from the Cherokee, Iowa area. And of course, as you know very well here, Mary Mulgrew-Gronin from up here in Dubuque were appointed and confirmed by the Senate. Mary was on early, but she had to leave to get to another meeting, but we couldn't be happier with the appointment of Bill and Mary. They've been tremendous commissioners since they've started in July. These are 4-year terms. So we're excited to be able to work with Bill and Mary the next 3.5 years for their term. There's 2 other commissioners that are highlighted on here, Sally Stutzman from the Iowa City Riverside area, and then Tom Riley from the Oskaloosa area. Their terms end this coming June. So at that point, it's their and the governor's decision on whether they want to pursue reappointment or move on. So we could have up to 2 new commissioners or 0 if they're both reappointed. But my hunch is that we'll have 1 new commissioner. Tom's been a multi-term commissioner, and so I suspect he's probably ready to move on. But that's kind of where the status of the commission is right now. So as I mentioned, the commission's most important role is approving the highway program. It always, every time I talk about the $4.5 billion figure, that's real money. And it's this commission that is responsible for allocating that to individual road and bridge projects over the next 5-year period. So our 25 to 29 program, the commission adopted it in June earlier this year. And that $4.5 billion is combined state and federal funding that's allocated for state highway projects, so interstate, US, and Iowa routes. The focus of the commission over the last 10 years or so has been increasing the amount of funding they put into what they call stewardship projects. So it's enhancing safety on the system, modernizing our roads and bridges, and reinvesting in our existing infrastructure. And so that has definitely was part of their trend this year. In particular, a little bit more of a focus on pavements and even more focused on interstate pavements. We have some stretches of interstate where pavements are deteriorating a little faster than we'd like to see. So we wanted to increase our investment in that area, and they were successful in that with this program. Truck parking is also an ongoing issue and challenge. A lot of our rest areas are at capacity at the nighttime with truck parking. They're backing up on the shoulders on the ramps, and parking at other interchange ramps in some areas. So we are trying to also add some parking spots at some of our rest areas in a strategic manner. So this next 5-year program adds 50 truck parking spots at some of our rest areas. The financial situation for the development of this program was actually pretty good compared to the previous program. The previous program, the commission was dealing with, as have all cities and counties, the calendar year 22 inflation, that was over 20% increase for construction products in the state of Iowa. That really had a significant impact on buying power and how much can be included in the program. The commission had to delay 12 projects a year and a half ago. Fortunately, inflation has moderated since calendar year 2022. And so this program that allowed them to not have to delay any projects for financial reasons and develop a good program, again, focused on preservation and modernization. The one significant project that was added in this 5-year program, really significant project, was the final phase of 380 widening between Iowa City and Cedar Rapids. Of course, the mixed mastered I-80 and 380 was recently completed. We immediately began construction working north on 380 from there. We then the commission programmed work on 380 up by the Wright Brothers Boulevard interchange and the Eastern Iowa Airport. Working south, that project was let just in July and construction already well underway as we speak. But it was that middle stretch that wasn't programmed, and now the commission has added that to the program. So going to see a lot of work on the 380 corridor in the next 6 to 10 years, but it'll be a great improvement over that time. The last piece, again, I'll talk a little bit more about this, is as we've talked about in the past, federal funding First comes an authorization bill, which provides very specific funding levels for very specific funding programs for a 5-year period. The infrastructure bill was our last authorization bill. Although it still seems like that just was passed, we're already well into that and seeing the end of the infrastructure bill in place. So this 5-year program, the commission adopted, actually the last 3 years of that bill are past the life of the infrastructure bill. So that adds uncertainty to the programming process, which I'll talk about. So here's a chart showing the inflationary trends specifically tied to road and bridge construction in Iowa. And so you clearly can't see the numbers on here, but you can see the red line and the trend. This goes back to, I think it's 1986, where our Contracts and Specifications Bureau, they're the bureau that lets all DOT projects and also a lot of local projects, federal aid projects and farmer market projects. They look at the bid results every month and they calculate construction cost indices for individual units of construction, and then they calculate an overall construction cost index. So it's really like the consumer price index, except very focused on road and bridge construction projects in Iowa. So this shows the trend of that construction cost index up through September of this calendar year. Any day now, we'll be getting the results through our December letting, so an end of the year calendar year 24. As I mentioned, in calendar year 22, we saw over a 22% increase in those construction costs on a per unit basis, actually about 23%. Fortunately, in 23, we saw that go down 1%, so very, very moderate and flat. In 24, it's actually down 12% through September. And I know our lettings in October, November, and December have also been favorable. So I think the end of the year number is going to be in that ballpark. So that puts us in a much better position. Of course, we still haven't recovered from the 23% increase. Not even talking about all the other past increases. We had shocks to the system over time that have really impacted the buying power of the funding we do have. Which I'll put that together in this slide. I think you've seen versions of this in past presentations. This shows the total road use tax fund revenue in the state of Iowa. So this is our fuel tax, vehicle registration fees, fee for new vehicle registration. The blue line reflects actual dollars deposited in the road use tax fund each year. In fiscal year 24, we went above the $2 billion mark for the first time. So you can see pretty good growth in the blue line. The fuel tax increase is the second vertical line here. You can see a nice bump with that $100 million fuel tax increase coming from the 10%, I'm sorry, $200 million increase coming from the 10-cent per gallon fuel tax increase. What the red line reflects is the constant buying power of those dollars when you deflate them using that construction cost index. So there you can see it tells a bit of a different story. We certainly saw we're on a declining buying power trend, and then we had the Time 21 fund, which increased vehicle registration fees. That moderated it, kept it flat. Fuel tax increase provided some growth in buying power. But actually today we have less buying power than we did when we got the fuel tax increase in 2015. So already that increase in buying power from 9 years ago has been consumed by inflation. So still a challenge. Again, this doesn't show the federal funding. And as was mentioned earlier, the infrastructure bill provided a nice increase in federal funding. So that certainly helped offset some of these challenges, but it still has had an impact on the amount of work that we can do on the system, again, at the state, city, and county level. So where we're at in fiscal year 25, of course, that began in July of this year. From the department's operating budget, we're about 4 or 5% below our planned budget. The reason we talk about that is our operating budget at the department comes from the road use tax fund. So we want to be very good stewards of that because we want to maximize funding for construction. So we're always very judicious in what we ask for the legislature to appropriate for our budget. And then throughout the year, we're judicious in how we spend that because what we don't spend gets reverted to the primary road fund for us to use on construction. So we always track very closely how we're doing with our operating budget. As you might expect, a lot of that's dependent on what happens in the winter and how much overtime are we getting, storms during holidays, again, those types of issues. But so far, so good. In terms of highway funding, on the state revenue side, we present to the commission every month an update on how our lettings are doing compared to what we had estimated those projects to cost in our 5-year program. That is going very well so far in our lettings through November. The letting results have actually come in $43 million below what we had in the program. So that's, again, why we're seeing good numbers coming into our next program development. On the revenue side, we also track actual receipts every month compared to our forecast. And we're slightly below our forecast, about 2 million below the forecast. It was a little worse than that earlier. We think primarily because we are seeing some impact on vehicle sales, seeing more people buy used vehicles instead of new vehicles, trying to get some lower prices. Of course, higher interest rates for car loans is having an impact, but we're seeing that bounce back down. So we think we'll end up being positive on that. So overall, with letting projects coming in a lot less than we'd had estimated, revenue basically flat, we're doing very well overall at the department. And I imagine it's a similar situation across other jurisdictions. On the federal funding side, federal fiscal year began October 1st. As is pretty normal, there is not a full appropriation bill at the federal level. We're operating under a continuing resolution. That continuing resolution expires on Friday. I think just yesterday they reached an agreement. Of course, they still have to get that agreement passed in the House and the Senate. That agreement would extend that continuing resolution to March 14th. So give them some more time with the new administration and the new Congress to pass that. Continuing resolutions really don't have an impact on funding, transportation funding. We don't get access to authorized increases in programs because we're operating under the previous fiscal year's funding levels. But that doesn't really provide an impact as long as they actually end up getting the full appropriation bill passed. Even if they did not get a continuing resolution done exactly on time, that really is minimal impact, especially on for surface transportation, maybe a little bit more impactful for other modes of transportation. Couple good notes. There's talk about discretionary funding at the federal level. Of course, Dubuque has done a tremendous job in getting discretionary grants. We've had a couple successful grants here in the last 12 months. We were able to get a nice grant back a year ago for that Wright Brothers Boulevard I-380 project. And then just a couple months ago, we got about a $69 million grant to help with our Southwest Mix Master project in the Des Moines area. So very, very helpful to get those discretionary grants. So the development of the 5-year program is a multi-month effort. It's probably actually about a 7-month effort with the commission. It's a tremendous amount of material and information that is shared with them. They meet monthly in Ames, except for 4 meetings in the summertime where they do regional meetings across the state. And so, so we have limited time with them. So it takes quite a while to provide them the information they need to develop and approve a 5-year program. So that work is already underway. In the next couple of months, we'll be presenting to them updated data on bridge conditions and modeling for forecast needs, same with pavement, safety data, funding forecasts, all to help them develop a program. Really same financial situation. Of course, we don't have any new revenue sources coming in. We're operating under the existing authorization bill, but inflation still is trending the right direction. But that we still have the buying power challenges from the last several years of high inflation. And now with this program, 4 of the 5 years will be beyond the life of the authorization bill, which again, when you don't know what those authorized levels are, it's a little bit challenging to know what you forecast for a program. And I'll talk a little bit more about the reauthorization here. There's certainly a lot of question marks about this reauthorization. Typically, a reauthorization bill covers 5 years, so the next one would likely covers fiscal year 27 to 31. Where a lot of the uncertainty comes in is what will Congress consider as the baseline for this next authorization bill? Typically, it's the last year of the previous authorization bill. That's the baseline that they start from. With the infrastructure bill, that's maybe a little bit more of a question mark, because certainly as Congress was deliberating the infrastructure bill, there was some discussion that some of the increases were more to be stimulating to the economy and to do some more one-time investments in infrastructure, and maybe shouldn't be considered a new baseline. So at least in theory, there could be some discussion out there that the last year of the infrastructure bill should not be the baseline for the next authorization bill. I think at the end of the day, though, it's going to be hard for Congress to actually do an authorization bill that cuts federal funding program. So we're likely going to be assuming and recommending the commission assume that, most conservatively, it's flat funding, but historically, every authorization bill has provided some funding increases. But it's more of a question mark this go around than past authorization bills. Also, we have, of course, a new administration in place beginning in January, and a new Congress. So they will be guiding the discussion of the next authorization bill. So what does that mean? Does that have an impact on the number and types of formula programs that exist? Will it impact the number and amount of discretionary programs? All the different stakeholders and lobbying groups are kind of working on their priorities now and starting to communicate with the next Congress and next administration to influence that discussion. But so that's another unknown and question mark. And then lastly, like our appropriation bill is rarely passed on time. Will the authorization bill be passed on time? They typically are not. So what do you assume for that first year? Again, when you don't have a new authorization bill, they do some form of a continuing resolution at flat funding levels. So again, these are a lot of questions that our commission will be discussing over the coming months as they develop the next program. Next couple of slides here about a highway trust fund. In the interest of time, I'm going to go through them really quickly. But another one of the challenges with the next reauthorization bill is this federal highway trust fund, which was created back in the 50s, much like our road use tax fund, to have dedicated road user fees be allocated out through federal highway and federal transit programs. That has not been sustainable in the long run. 84% of highway trust fund revenues come from the federal fuel tax, which hasn't been increased since 1993. And so that revenue stream, particularly as vehicles have become much more fuel efficient since 93, and now we have a lot of electric vehicles coming into the fleet, that revenue stream is shrinking. But again, I mentioned Congress keeps providing increases, thankfully, increases in federal allocations. So there's a point where you can see there's a disconnect in the revenues coming in and the outlay. And so what that means is that there's been that imbalance in place since the early 2000s, and actually the Highway Trust Fund, this has ran out of money. It didn't technically run out of money, but that was the year where it would run out of money unless there was some action taken by Congress. So what Congress has been doing since that time is transferring general fund money into the Highway Trust Fund. The infrastructure bill was their last transfer. They transferred $118 billion of general fund money into the Highway Trust Fund to fund at the levels they authorized. That amount that they will have to transfer grows dramatically over time. So the next authorization bill, they're going to have to find even more money to transfer into the Highway Trust Fund. So I bring this up just because that's another one of those challenges to this next authorization bill and discussion. We are seeing some discussion in Congress about potential changes to the Highway Trust Fund. It seems like a little bit of the focus right now is talking about electric vehicles and talking about whether there ought to be a federal supplemental registration fee or doing something to collect a user fee. Again, the Highway Trust Fund is primarily from fuel tax, which electric vehicles aren't paying. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some activity there. Now, electric vehicles still are a very, very small percentage of the fleet. So whatever they do will be for an equity adjustment. It really won't solve it. Aren't hearing much discussion about kind of significant efforts to solve that other than finding more general fund money to transfer to the Highway Trust Fund. All right, I have several slides here and I'm going to go through them again very quickly like the last section. I think last year I talked a little bit about the boards and commissions bill, which the legislature eliminated a lot of boards and commissions, kind of the ongoing effort to provide more efficiency in state government. One of the committees that was eliminated in that bill was the Secondary Road Fund Distribution Committee, which is a committee of county engineers and supervisors that plays a vital role. Ultimately, they end up evaluating and ultimately determining the formula for how the Secondary Road Fund and Farm to Market funds are distributed to individual counties. It's been a great system. It was created to solve a lot of highly variable allocations in those funds. Before that system existed, that made programming and planning at a county level extremely challenging. So it's been a great system. But that committee was eliminated by the boards and commissions legislation, and the authority for determining those county allocations was passed along to the Iowa Transportation Commission. So we've had a lot of discussion with the Transportation Commission since that bill was passed. And we've partnered with the County Engineers Association for some of that effort. Really wanting to emphasize to the commission how important a role this committee plays in the process. One of the pieces of that boards and commissions legislation was to provide the Transportation Commission the authority to create ad hoc committees. Just to cut to the chase a bit, what the commission actually adopted in September was a new administrative rule that really keeps in place the existing Secondary Road Fund Distribution Committee as an ad hoc committee and all the processes they established for evaluating changes to formulas, and ultimately adopted the same formulas that are in place right now. So the commission is now just kind of an extra body into this process, but otherwise the process remains as it is. The commission very much understood the importance of retaining that system and was very supportive of that. So we're still working our way through the administrative rulemaking process for that. As I mentioned, the commission approved that rulemaking back in September. Now it goes through a lot of the public input rulemaking process. We'll wrap up eventually in March with final commission approval, but we're not expecting any challenges with that process. All right, last item is a quick update on NEVI. So as Mayor Cavanagh said, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program was a new formula program in the infrastructure bill, and states were allocated a certain amount of funding over the life of that bill to install or support the installation of DC fast charging sites on existing alternative fuel corridors. And as the mayor said, in Iowa, that system basically is the interstate system. So we have no ability to use that funding off the interstate system until the interstate is fully built out. So there's very specific criteria. I talked a lot about this last year. You have to have a station every 50 miles on the interstate with at least 4 ports at certain power levels, operational certain levels. The way US DOT interpreted US code is that states are not able to allocate that money for projects off the interstate system in Iowa until all those stations are operational, which will be several years out. We did just allocate our first round of funding, over $20 million of funding. That would almost fully build out the interstate. There are 3 small gaps, which we think we can take care of pretty quickly. We're gonna do a solicitation here early in this next calendar year, to try to get those 3 gaps, awarded funds. But even then, it's gonna take a couple years to get those built and operational. But just here in the last couple of weeks, USDOT came out with some updated guidance, and they've kind of reinterpreted their criteria for when you can start building off your existing alternative fuel corridor system. And now they don't say it has to be fully operational. It's more like, have you awarded funds to those sites? Do you have agreements in place? Are they ready to proceed to construction? So that will allow us to greatly accelerate our consideration of corridors off the interstate system. And so not exactly sure of the timing of that. Again, we still have 3 gaps that we're hoping to clear up this spring. But we can now start thinking about that instead of waiting a couple years. And as I think I mentioned last year, one corridor that I think is a no-brainer will be a next priority corridor is the 151 corridor, because that is a designated corridor in Wisconsin. So that's really the one area where we don't connect with an adjacent state. So clearly the 151 corridor from Cedar Rapids up to the border here in Dubuque will be on that next system. So hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll have some more definition on the timing of that and what that process looks like. All right. Any questions on any of that or anything else?
I do.
Yeah.
So what I've heard in both presentations is more geared around the metropolitan areas or bigger areas or larger cities. A lot of us live in really rural areas that we have DOT highways that really need some attention. Now I have one highway from Andrew to Bellevue, which was milled down approximately 10 years ago and never finished. Half of it was finished. Now, if you drive it with your car or my pickup, you're probably okay. But now if you take a dump truck or a school bus, you're not really okay.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned about these little rural areas. We have 2 intersections that me and you and Sam have talked about for years. And one is 61 Hurstville intersection. And one is the 52 395th intersection north of Bellevue, where there's a large camping area and water park. And I'm really not waiting for a fatality to happen, but I would like to see something planned. Now, I hear that the highway from Andrew to Bellevue, not even on the 5-year road plan, like I said, it was milled down 8 to 10 years ago.
Yeah, so a couple things. Certainly, I think we and the commission would agree that we need to do more on our existing infrastructure, which is why they've been working hard to shift that. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen overnight, especially when you lose all that buying power. But that's the sole reason the commission has been shifting their emphasis on building 4-lane corridors to putting more into pavements and bridges. Now, certainly we haven't caught up by any stretch, but I know in the last year of the program they just approved, over 90% of their annual allocation is going into stewardship. One good thing to say about your comment about a project not being in the 5-year program is really our pavement projects. We only program 1 year at a time, just because those changes can fluctuate so much. So just because it's not listed in the 5-year program doesn't mean it's not kind of a candidate or on a list that the district's looking at over that 5-year period. Because really we're just finalizing that first year. But I would say just continue the dialogue with us, and we're working with the commission hard to try to catch up on that. Other questions or comments? Yeah.
Just to make a comment, Jeff Maddasion, Delaware County Supervisor, want to really thank the DOT. They just did Highway 13 from the north edge of Manchester to the intersection with 3. And what an awesome project. And they completed it in 1 summer, 10 miles. And we've had tons of comment how nice it is.
Good. We just need to get around to more of those. Yeah. Good, but good to hear that, making some progress. Anything else?
I do want to thank you for half that road that's complete, but.
Be nice to get the other half. It's easier with half.
Closer to me.
Of course, that's the way it goes. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the highway trust fund and potential fixes, and the slide listed raising the tax, but you didn't really talk about that. Is that because it's not politically tenable?
You know, that's always interesting, because so many states have raised the state fuel tax, in the last 15 to 20 years. It really hasn't been an issue at the state level. But boy, once it gets to that congressional level, it's a very different question. To the point that it really hasn't even been on the table for discussion, and now we're not expecting it to be on the table. Again, they've found general fund money to do that. So, you know, I guess Congress has prioritized that. You know, I guess speaking from an Iowa perspective, we certainly have very much valued the user fee perspective in the state, and we think that is the most appropriate and beneficial way to, you know, really look at the users paying a fee to use the system and putting that into the system. In fact, that's ingrained in our state constitution. But yeah, it's just for whatever reason, once it gets to the national level, it's just not viable.
Like you said, with ride the rail, I understand passenger rail isn't a high priority, and that's partly because the state isn't in the Midwest interstate rail, passenger rail compact. We're gonna be working very hard this legislative session to get that through. It made it through the House, didn't make it through the Senate, and I understand why DOT, but a couple of the commissioners have already heard from us and are in touch. So I'm looking to see what you're gonna present next year about rail.
Yeah, you know, passenger rail has been, we've certainly endorsed passenger rail in our long range planning efforts and our rail plan, which we'll be updating here in the next few months. We definitely believe passenger rail is a viable mode of transportation and something that we ought to be looking at. We still consult regularly with Illinois DOT as they're working on their grant to get from Chicago to Moline. And we actually, the one commitment we have made is that once that happens, we have the ability and will fund and implement that companion bus service. So we at least have the single ticket bus passenger rail connection. We think that'll be an important process to have in place to help support some of the ridership estimates. You know, we get a lot of skepticism from people when we talk about the demand and ridership estimates. And so we think that'll be helpful in helping build a case for passenger rail, because we do think there certainly are some viable corridors.
You're gonna be working on the plan in the next couple of months, a new plan?
We'll be finalizing actually an update to our overall rail plan, which looks at freight and passenger rail. So, yep.
Freight and passenger.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Because, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like in the passenger.
Yeah. You know, certainly one of the challenges, of course, Iowa was successful in partnering with Illinois DOT on a grant to go from Chicago to Iowa City. But, you know, part of the challenge has just been really the ballooning cost estimates as you really get into the details and work with the host railroads to identify the infrastructure needs. And so that really was the big hurdle that we weren't able to overcome in Iowa is identifying, we had a shortfall of funding at the federal level and certainly at the state level and trying to do that. So we're really just kind of on hold now, but again, eager to see what happens in Illinois if they're able to get that to Moline.
Will the endorsement of the compact help stimulate the process?
It certainly won't hurt. I think the value of the compact is that there will be legislators that are actually appointed members of that. So I think that'll get some more kind of direct legislative interest and opportunity to share information. So I think that's probably the main value, because we certainly do, even outside of that compact, partner with our adjacent states in the Midwest and FRA and broader passenger rail planning initiatives.
Okay. We have a question online.
Yes. Ann, you have a question?
This is Ann McDonough, Dubuque County Supervisor. Thank you for being here with us. My question concerns the ports of Eastern Iowa, the newly formed Port Authority. And the question is, with the Department of Transportation, how could you help us with funding, if any? We are trying to organize and have a very active and a very supportive partner with the Corn Belts Association. But it's hard to get organized and get going. We see the future brightly, but is there a suggestion that you might have for assistance with the development of the port authorities? I think we will be instrumental in bringing federal funding to all of the river communities who have port needs, but just really interested in your expertise and the idea of partnering with the Iowa Department of Transportation. Thank you.
Yeah, and certainly, I think the partnering perspective of that is probably most important. And certainly we've been working with Bob and the RPAs and MPOs along the Mississippi River as these discussions have been going on. And I think those important efforts are really important. I think the planning agencies, local jurisdictions have a really vital, important role to play in that. And now the ports, I think, have an enhanced role in helping make the case. Regarding funding directly to support activities of the ports, at the end of the day, that's really a legislative decision and allocation of funding for that. So yeah, that's probably more of a legislative discussion than anything else.
Thank you.
Just quickly, would support from the commission help move that along too, since we have a commissioner from this area?
The commission historically has not really gotten into kind of legislative lobbying, I guess, for lack of a better word. Certainly, the river being a Corps of Engineers system, there's not really kind of a funding mechanism directly tied to the commission, but certainly the commission through their long-range planning has been extremely supportive of our multimodal system, of course, wanting to take advantage of our unique two borders of navigable rivers on the Missouri and Mississippi. The commission did allocate some funding several years ago for installing a mooring cell in the Quad Cities, utilizing some flexible freight funding. Unfortunately, it ended up bizarrely being impossible to give money to the Corps of Engineers. So that ended up not happening. But of course, the infrastructure bill came along and provided tremendous increase in funding for the river, including constructing a lot of mooring cells. So the commission has, at least from a funding side, a little bit more of an indirect role than they do with the other modes of transportation. Thank you. Okay.
Concludes our meeting. So happy holidays and thanks for coming.
Thanks, Chandra.
And if anybody wants some fried chicken to take home, since they finally brought it, there's to go out there, and you're more than welcome to take some home.
Oh my
Yeah.